That's good, Faith Walkers. Welcome back. We're going to dive into a two-part teaching. So we're going to do part one together today, and then we will shift into part two just because there is so much goodness. So I want to slow down and dive into some areas and really make sure that you can absorb this so that you can apply it. So the teaching is going to be on how to be a full capacity leader in this time. And the premise is that you don't actually lack capacity. You actually haven't been trained to build it. Okay. And we absolutely, in order to be leaders worth following, we need to build capacity that is different for these times. We need to have a different kind of mental capacity, emotional capacity, spiritual capacity, physical capacity, relational capacity, financial capacity, creative capacity. You get the idea. So we're going to dive into that together. This is a great time to subscribe, to share, to invite somebody to be here. Okay. But let's go ahead and do it. We got a lot to cover in a couple of sessions. So let's dive in. Okay. Now, here's something that I find really fascinating, and you might have fallen into this. I know that it sounded good. But this is what used to be kind of trendy. Like we felt like we got, stickers for this. We felt like we got validation for this. We felt like a really important person because we said this. But there has been a time where if you were to walk up to somebody and say, "Hey, how are you doing?" They would say, "Oh my gosh, I'm so busy," right? "I'm just so busy." People would glorify being busy. It was like wearing busy like a badge of honor had been the saying, right? Some people are still there, but that was a big thing for a long time. It was like, how busy can I be? Right? And I wonder what that busyness is covering, right? Now, you, just like before, where you'd ask somebody, "How are you doing?" And they would say, "I'm busy." And it was like this badge of honor. The language has shifted. There's still sort of like a saying, but now it's different because the world is different. And because there's been so much happening in the world, people want that soft life is what's floating out there, right? They don't want to exert themselves. They don't want to stretch. They don't want any weight, right? So now people will say, "I don't have capacity," as the polite way of excusing themselves from responsibility. And sometimes it is an excuse. They legitimately are just giving themselves an out to not have to show up, because showing up just feels like too much. Everything just feels like too much. And sometimes, in fairness, sometimes that is true. Okay, sometimes it absolutely is true. However, sometimes people can be genuinely overwhelmed. Sometimes rest can be necessary. Sometimes they're in a season of healing, right? Or grieving. Sometimes boundaries are always healthy, but sometimes really enforcing boundaries is essential, right? But not always. Sometimes "I don't have capacity" has become this more sophisticated way of shrinking back, of not taking accountability, of not taking ownership, and in not showing up for life. Okay, it's a way of avoiding any sort of weight. Like, life is already heavy, so why would I add more weight? Kind of the idea, right? It's a way of avoiding responsibility because somehow that seems justified. Like, we think that if we avoid responsibility, life gets easier, when the opposite is true. It actually becomes more difficult and there's more consequences there. And it could also be a way of stepping out of moments that actually require something from us. Like, this is an opportunity that we are led to step into. It's like God sending the boat, but we don't get in it. We keep asking for help. We keep asking for a resource. God sends it, but it comes in seed form. It's not like the full oak tree, right? So we mishandle it because we don't recognize it. And that's what we're going to explore together. What if the issue is not that you don't have capacity like you're saying? What if the issue is you've never been trained to build it? And that's actually what this is an opportunity to do, is to put a capacity rep in, right? So we are living in a time that requires more from people, not less, right? Tough times build tough people, right? Really easy times build weak people. We are in tough times and we need really tough people in these times, the ones that are trained to rise up, ones that are trained to show up boldly and courageously, ones that are trained how to renew their minds so they don't take everything so personally, some that have emotional intelligence so that they're not constantly misinterpreting what's happening. Right? So we need more clarity. We need more responsibility. We need more discernment. We need more risk. We need emotional stability. And we need more spiritual maturity. We do. And yet, at the same time, we're seeing more people opt out. Which means if they opt out, you're opting out of your development journey. You're opting out of your preparation. And my argument would be is that you don't have the luxury of that. And the consequence of that is greater than you're currently evaluating right now. It's like sometimes people think about, let's say, betraying somebody. So they know that they're going to do something that is going to be harmful, but they think they'll get away with it and it won't be a big deal to work itself out. Well, what they didn't consider was how that was actually going to impact somebody and the consequence of that long term. So where they had like access to this person, access to loyalty, access to blessing, access to resources, because of this betrayal, now they're no longer trustworthy and they lost access completely. Well, they didn't think that that was going to happen, and now that's a big loss, but they didn't factor that in because they only thought selfishly. Does this make sense? So, at this time, while people are opting out, not always because they're incapable, but because they've never been formed to carry weight well, we need people that build capacity. We don't need people that protect their limitations and create a case and create excuses for being small and for shrinking back in life. We need people that really create and co-create with God a different pattern, because that old pattern of shrinking eventually becomes your identity. So where you're supposed to be courageous, you're actually being a coward. Where you're supposed to be strong, you're actually weak. Where you're supposed to confront, you fall back and you avoid. This is a problem, but it's been a problem, and it's what's being trained. So you have to be careful with, I don't just have capacity. Maybe that's the invitation right now to build it, right? Capacity isn't just something that you have, okay? It is something that you build. This is co-creation at work. God is building and forming something, his likeness, his nature, his strategy, right? You are God's solution in the earth. So he is forming you to reform some things in the earth, okay? So capacity isn't just something that you have, it is something that you build. Big difference. And that's the most important thing that people have not really been taught. We think that we're just going to arrive somewhere ready. We think that it's just going to show up on our doorstep and we're going to know what to do with it. That's like saying that you're just going to go get married, but you're not prepared for the marriage. You're prepared for the ceremony and kind of the party. That is a huge difference, but it's kind of how the world is trained right now. We're trained for a moment, right? We're not trained for the stewardship of that moment. So we've been taught how to perform. We've been taught how to do that. We've been taught how to produce, how to achieve, right? We've been taught this, but we've not been taught how to be internally formed enough to actually sustain and carry well what we're building, what we're being asked to carry. Okay, so when the pressure comes because we don't have that form on the inside of us, when the responsibility increases, when opportunities expand, it doesn't feel like growth. Okay, it feels like it's too much. It feels like we might break. And sometimes we break down. Sometimes that does happen. So I want to introduce this framework to you. Okay, I have found when I've been stewarding prophetic words and just walking out a journey, right? That it's very true what the verse says, right? In Genesis, right? The verse says there is seed time and there's harvest, right? But I always looked at those maybe as like seed time and harvest, but I see it now as seed time, like seed time, and then harvest, okay? So the principle in Genesis says it this way. As long as the earth remains, there will be seed time and harvest. And seed time is one word, okay? and then there's harvest. So we often see like seed time, there's this time, and there's this time. I'm either sowing seeds or I'm harvesting. Like that's what we see. Well, when it comes to a prophetic word, okay, you receive the seed of the word, right? We sow the seed of the word into our heart. We sow the living word, the seed, the word of God into our heart. Similarly, when we receive a word from the Lord that is sown into our heart, then there is time, and we don't know how long that time is. That is processing the word, that is stewardship of the promise, that is preparing for what God is leading you into before there is fulfillment of the promise or harvest, okay? And we grossly underestimate that time part. Or we don't recognize the seed, okay? So notice something here. It doesn't say seed and harvest, okay? It says seed, time, and harvest. And how you steward that time here in the natural is a big deal. That middle part, time, can be so messy or it can be full of miracles. And a lot of times it's a mix of both. And this is where many people struggle, okay? Because the seed, the idea, the vision, the plan, the strategy, all of that is really fun and it's really exciting. But the Bible also says better is the end of a thing than the beginning, because that excitement is fleeting, right? Will you actually have the courage, which I think is keeping the passion, keeping the fire, keeping the enthusiasm after all of the enduring? Will you still have the same passion that you had in the beginning when you got the seed as you do when you're fulfilling the promise? Or will you lose it in the time and in the process, right? So seed is exciting and harvest feels rewarding, but a majority of the journey, no matter where we are in time. We are in time. And time is where formation happens. Time is when you're really in the dark room of destiny. Time is where things are being built that no one sees yet. So there's not a whole lot of validation. There's not affirmation. Sometimes you feel like you're completely missing God. You just feel alone, right? And you're walking this thing out. So it can feel like so much, okay? Time is where things that are built that nobody sees yet. It's where pressure, delays, challenges, disappointments, all of this kind of stretching is taking place, okay? So here is the key insight to be a full capacity leader in this time, all right? You are always living in two seasons at one time. And that can feel super awkward because you are working on being fully present here, knowing that you're not always going to be here because nothing's permanent. You're technically in transition. And then you're also building for this place that you're going to. Like that does inform how you're showing up here, because the best way to build your future is in what you're doing in the present today, right? So you're building in this moment and you're building for what's next. But you don't have sometimes the reward of either. And that can be tough because we're trained for outcomes. We're trained for feeling things that feel good, right? So you are living two seasons at one time. You are harvesting from seeds that you planted in the past. That's your now, okay? While at the same time, you are planting seeds and sowing seeds for a future that you can't see yet, okay? An example of this, I had multiple streams of income coming in, and I lost two significant sources within 2 months from each other, like boom, boom, like just two sucker punches, right? And so that could have been the worst thing ever, or it could have been the best thing ever. And that was entirely up to how I perceived it and how I prepared for that moment, right? Because the truth is you could lose any source of income at any time. Some have lived that experience, right? So the source of that income, right, needs to be the Lord. God can use anything to get resource to you, but he absolutely has to be your source. Your job can't be your source, right? So sometimes that is a lesson that plays out. Now, what's interesting about that is in that time, I didn't completely lose it because for years, okay, I was building for something that it was now time for. And all that did was make it abundantly clear that it was time, and it was time to shift into what that time was with everything that I had practiced and prepared for, because I had been building behind the scenes the whole time. So it was not surprising. It was more like a promotion. Okay? So you are building the life that you're living right now. And at the same time, you're building the life that you're stepping into next, because you don't know when that next moment is going to hit, but you know it's going to hit. Okay. And you got to be ready for it. And the space between those two, right? This is the space called time. And it's where your capacity is being formed. So a lot of like the resistance and the pressure and the tough stuff is actually experiential education or Holy Spirit boot camp that's getting you ready for where you're going. Only that can be confusing in real time because you don't fully know where you're going yet. You just know that you're in training. And we're in training a lot of the time. We are learning, in training, or literally in season. Okay? So that can be really interesting. Like you are now fulfilling, executing, right? So really, really important here. Why does this matter? Well, most people want the next level of their life. We see it. Sometimes people are talking about it all the time. Next level living, best life. There's lots of language around this next level, metaphorically, that people want to get to. They want more influence. They want more opportunity. They want more impact. They want more expansion, and we're supposed to grow. So that's good. That's a normal thing. But they don't realize that every level of expansion, okay, requires a matching level of internal capacity. And when your outsides get bigger than your insides, you're in big trouble because you can't handle it. You got to be bigger in the spirit. He must increase, I must decrease in order for you to handle the responsibility that he's entrusting to you. And if you've been faithful with the little he's given you, then you can be faithful with the much that you're now moving into. Does this make sense? But if not, that will absolutely destroy you in what's connected to you. Okay? So if your internal world does not grow at the same pace as your external expectations and opportunities here, pressure will eventually expose that gap, and it might expose you. Okay? It'll expose whatever you have been practicing and whatever you've been allowing to be formed in you. Whatever you've been training, that will be exposed. So this is where people usually start saying, this is too much. I don't have capacity. I just need to step back. And again, sometimes that is true. That is discernment and that is wisdom. However, often this is also an excuse. Sometimes it is a signal that something hasn't been built internally yet. So you're actually not as ready as you think for what is being put on you. Okay. So this is something that I deeply observed of a journey that I had been on, but I hadn't seen it articulated. I hadn't seen anybody put language to this, and I found it to be so helpful to do so. So this is something that I could really recognize as I was writing my book, Full Capacity, How to Live Ridiculously Free and Fuel a Life Without Limits. The book is live, so you have to make sure that you get it right now. Go and get it on Amazon. Full Capacity, Juliana Page. The Kindle right now is 99 cents, so make sure you get that. Leave a review, but that would be so amazing. If you didn't know, it's there. Okay, so I'll make sure to give you all those details, but go get the book, all right? Also, as I was writing this book, I thought in the beginning that it was just another book. It was just another project. It was just another assignment from the Lord. That's what I thought initially, okay? It ended up becoming something much different and becoming a process of formation, again, that I had never seen articulated before or anybody put language to, okay? So there were, with the book alone, but what I show in the book, there were delays I didn't expect. There was resistance I didn't understand. There were moments where things felt way harder than they needed to be. And I just did not understand because it felt so much like I am obeying, I am tracking, I am doing the right things, right? But that's not always yielding in the moment the return that you would expect. That doesn't always feel like what you think it would feel like, right? So eventually, I just kept realizing that there were so many obstacles. Like, this is what I thought. I thought these things were obstacles, but eventually I realized they were training and they were necessary. They were developing something that I didn't yet have. And so the reps were important, Okay, I can think about a really important time. I had been building, building, building. And when you're building, 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 you can get tired. And I thought eventually there's going to be like a and exhale. Only the exhale didn't come. And I was waiting for it. And I thought, okay, when this is done, when this is done, when this happens, right? But what the Lord was teaching me was how to rest with Him in motion. And what He said was keep building. But I was like, where's the relief? Where's the relief? And He's like, you don't need the relief right now. Keep building. And I thought, but this just doesn't feel like what I thought it to. What I thought it was going to feel like. And it doesn't need to, right? Well, I thought that it was supposed to look like this, and it doesn't have to look like that. Well, I really wanted this, and that's great, but this is what you need. Like I was being coached by the Lord, okay? And He was telling me to keep building when that wasn't what I wanted to do in the flesh or in my natural, right? I wanted to take a break, okay? But it wasn't coming. And He's like, if you needed it, I would give it to you. You don't need it, right? So that was training. And these seasons were developing something in me that I didn't yet have, whether that was the determination, the resolve, the focus, the follow through, whatever that was, right? The carrying capacity, the ability to focus, whatever it was. Sometimes the delay, right, isn't about the outcome. Sometimes it's about the leader, okay? Sometimes it's not about being held back, but it's about being built. You being built, not even what you're building. So this is where you have an opportunity to reflect honestly for yourself personally, okay? Where in your life have you been saying, I just don't have capacity? I just don't have capacity. And again, no shame. We're not making this good, bad, right, or wrong. No shame. Just answer honestly. Just get the clarity that is available here, because sometimes, again, the statement is true. But sometimes it's covering something deeper, okay? So maybe it's, I don't know how to carry this yet, and that's uncomfortable. Maybe it's, I haven't developed that discipline yet, and I don't want to. I'm more familiar with procrastination than follow through, whatever that is, right? I haven't built the internal stability yet. I'm so unsteady on the inside. How am I going to create steady on the outside? Great observation, the Lord, right? I haven't been formed for this level yet. Super honest. That makes a lot of sense. And God does a lot of His best work as on-the-job training, right? And those are all very different conversations, okay? Because one will lead to avoidance and the other will lead to growth. And you are on a growth journey with the Lord. Like we are constantly developing. There's no arriving here. We are constantly maturing and evolving, right? So, to bring this back, we are living in a time that requires people to have the nature of Christ formed in them, because earthly solutions to earthly problems is not going to be how they're solved, right? The same level of thinking that created the problem is not going to solve it. We need otherworldly help and support, right? We need the Lord. So, we need people that can carry weight, not perfectly, but faithfully. Whether they have the outcome immediately or not, whether the outcome happens while they're here or after their time here, like the heroes of the faith that we read about, right? People who can stay steady under pressure, people who don't take everything personally, people who can remain clear in the middle of deep complexity, people who can take responsibility instead of constantly stepping back from it and dodging ownership and accountability. And that kind of leadership does not happen automatically. It is built, okay? So this is what we're going to do to close out part one, then we'll go to part two. If capacity is built, not just claimed, okay, and it's formed in the time, okay, between seed and harvest, then the real question becomes this: what is actually building your capacity right now? That boss that gets on your nerves, what is that building capacity for? That financial strain, what is that building capacity for? That delay, what is that building capacity for? Are you avoiding the very things that could be forming the very greatness that God wants to express in you, through you, and around you? Or are you leaning into the process that God has for you and that's preparing you for what's next? Amazing questions to answer. Full capacity leadership is not about doing more and glorifying busy, but it is about somebody who can carry more, not for ego, but legitimately because that's been tested and proven, and because you've been faithful. And now you're trustworthy, and it just makes sense. It's just the next step in your journey, okay? So in the next video, the next training here, I am going to walk you through the 6 specific things that actually did build capacity and will build capacity in a leader's life, okay? And they might be things that you don't expect, because if you understand what is forming you, you can stop avoiding it, yay, and you can start growing it. Okay, so make sure that you go get the book. If you do want to train with us, we've got some exciting ways that you can plug in that we released inside Courage Co. Okay, so I'll put the information for both of those things below so you can explore. All right, I hope this blessed you, and until next